Hey everyone, welcome to the inside of my mind, or the inside of my car, which is inside a parking garage at the moment. I've been thinking about different trends in comic books, trends in story types or thematic types or however you will. I think because I'm both reading a lot of comics, watching a lot of your videos, poking around online a lot, just seeing so much information about comic books these past few years, that I definitely have a feeling of certain like storytelling trends that I see. And I don't have examples of them all here with me, but I just happen to have some. One little trend I noticed is what I think of as the Ocean's 11 trend. It seems like there's a lot of indie books being, pitched as Ocean's 11 with ghosts, or Ocean's 11 in the future, or Ocean's 11 in outer space, or what have you. Ghosted being the latest one of those. I think there was even one called Scam. And anyway, there's a bunch of those. And kind of related to those, it seems like there's a lot of books kind of about thieves who were supposed to kind of take as heroes. I haven't read Five Ghosts yet, but I gather he's kind of a thief or a treasure hunter. And there's Thief of Thieves, of course, but there seems to be a bunch of others. There's Sex Criminals, which just came out. Sex Criminals connects with another theme I'm thinking we're seeing, which is naughty books. Fairly mainstream independent books that have a lot of sex in them. And we even have one named Sex and Sex Criminals now. And I gather Bounce is getting rather sexy. And there is Saga, of course, which probably didn't start the trend, but was sort of the first book I noticed that was basically appealed to the center of the comic book reading audience, but also included, whenever the author feels like it, pretty out there graphic stuff. Although I wouldn't call Saga to be anything like Sex or Sex Criminals that's saying, look at us, we're being naughty. And I think that trend is maybe part of this publishing trend of the indie creator-owned books becoming more mainstream, so to speak. We're getting people who we think of as mainstream writers and artists, doing naughty things in books that we're all seeing, as opposed to somewhere way out on the real fringes. So it's kind of look at the freedom we've discovered, which has happened over and over again if you look at comics. I mean, first with the underground comics in the 60s, as far as I know. Of course, there were the Tijuana Bibles and that kind of thing back 100 years ago, practically. But anyway, that seems like a trend, and I'm somewhat interested. I mean, I had hoped that the comic book Sex would be good and interesting, especially because it had good art. But after 2 issues, I kind of lost interest in that. Didn't seem to be going anywhere of particular interest. But Sex Criminals might be an exception, might be going the other way and become very interesting. I know he's been doing it a long time, but I could even include those Howard Chaykin books in the mix of look at us, we're being naughty, we're being sexy. Let's see, that's only the beginning of the trends that I was thinking of, and of course I wrote down a list which I didn't bring with me. Okay, another trend is sort of the human weapon that's kind of a designer human weapon that then goes bad, or goes against its creators. And we've seen this over and over again in comics and science fiction movies. I'm sure Jean-Claude Van Damme has done it 3 or 4 times. But it just seems to be welling up a lot right now in what I'm seeing and what I'm reading. Lazarus and Zero seem to be the 2 examples that pop up most immediately into my head. as very new comic books doing this. I would say Lazarus does it right and Zero doesn't. So far. There's only been one issue of Zero, and I don't think I'll read beyond that issue. First 3 issues of Lazarus were good. And we get a kind of fuller, more complex world, both in the psychology of the characters and the background of the world, plus great art. I think Greg Rucka has really great timing as a writer, so that when you read a comic book by him, it's just incredibly well paced. Zero didn't have those things, but both of them have a human being who's been, or maybe multiple human beings, who've been raised to somehow be loyal to their agency or their family or their government, and then they start seeing that things aren't kosher or whatever, and they're kind of superhuman killing machines. Deathlock, way back in the day, was one of my favorites of this type of thing, and maybe that's a precursor to most of this stuff. I don't know. It's probably been around in science fiction in different forms forever. And in fact, Lazarus is post-apocalyptic, and we're seeing a lot of post-apocalyptic books. I guess maybe Six Gun Gorilla only looks post-apocalyptic. I'm not sure about that. We've got East of West, and darn, now I'm not thinking of. I know there's quite a few other post-apocalyptic books, and of course, we've had waves of post-apocalyptic books at least since the 50s. You know, with Planet of the Apes, the movie being the first one, being a great post-apocalyptic movie. Spoilers, if you've never seen Planet of the Apes, you'd only realize that it's post-apocalyptic at the end of the movie. And Commandy, and just all sorts of things. There was the War of the Worlds comic book, which they turned into kind of a post-apocalyptic, post-alien invasion apocalypse kind of thing. And I guess Lazarus isn't quite post-apocalyptic as it is post-economic collapse, but it has that same vibe. Everything's gone wrong, and the world kind of sucks now. And I really like that kind of thing. Even though East of West didn't grab me right away, I'll probably go back to it in trades. And I'll be looking around for other post-apocalyptic things. Another trend, also kind of science fiction-y, is science gone bad. Groups of scientists, foundations of scientists doing bad things. Certainly Manhattan projects, think tank. Now I can't think of what it's called. That one that science is the new rock and roll. There's Black Science is coming up from Rick Remender. And there are others. Again, in each of these cases, off the top of my head here, sitting in this parking garage, I'm not thinking of all the examples. But this is very interesting because this trend, this feels kind of new to me. I mean, there's always been the mad scientist, science gone wrong, scientists overreaching themselves and caring more about doing their science and discovering cool things than about its effects and what people, what its moral results are. Goes back to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, in the 1700s. But this trend of kind of think tanks, groups of scientists going wrong, and science almost as a superhero power, it seems to me. Like that's another maybe rising trend over a number of years, maybe the past 10 years or 5 or 6 years in comic books. We've seen more and more the idea of, the top smartest men in the Marvel universe, or people in the Marvel universe, and their science is so smart and they can do it so quickly that it's like a superpower. And now we're getting these groups of super powerful scientists, if you will, going off the rails together. And it's very compelling. I think it's a really cool kind of little mini trend. It seems like it's got lots of possibilities, but of course it's a little outside of the mainstream of superheroes, or certainly of heroes. Uh, and what does this rise of apocalyptic stuff and science that's evil, does that tell us something about our society right now? I feel like I know in the 50s and sometimes in the 60s, there was this fear of the atomic doom overhead. And then when I was a young adult under Ronald Reagan, he was always joking about pressing the button. And he had this tough line against Russia that, and just a general attitude about the survivability of nuclear war that made a lot of people really nervous. And I think we had a lot of apocalyptic fiction. I'm not sure about in comic books at that time. And, I know I even was writing apocalyptic fiction myself under the Ronald Reagan era. So is there something... I don't think people are afraid President Obama will press the bomb, and there's no Cold War going on, but there's the whole question mark about global warming, which science has been trying to warn us about, I think, since the early 80s, certainly all through the 90s. Now the idea is getting more acceptance. There's still people who think it's kind of a conspiracy. And maybe also there's the gloom of the sort of bad economy that's lasted quite a long while now, since the last bubble burst. I think we're slowly climbing out of it now, but we're not having a very obvious climb. So that may have a lingering effect too. I point out that scientists have been trying to warn us about global warming because I think it's ironic that if the subconscious thing is this worry about climate change that drives a post-apocalyptic feel, it's ironic that then there's also this thread of seeing scientists as out-of-control evil people. Because if you're totally looking at it, at least from my point of view, the scientists were trying to help with global warming, but the industrialists were worried that would harm their position in the world. So it's funny that we're picking on the scientists right now. Wonder if there's some... So it may or may not have anything to do with global warming. And now as I say that, I start thinking it may also just be anxiety with how fast, even though we all love being on the internet and making our connections with each other, there's something anxiety provoking about how fast technology is speeding up and entering our lives and taking over every aspect. Just the fact that I have to remember so many different passwords and codes kind of pisses me off every day. And then, you go to join something else just to get messages from the PTA, and you have to make up a new code, and it won't accept the code that you've always liked to use because it wants a certain combination of capitals and numbers and all. Anyway, that's a small thing, and you wouldn't think we'd blame that on scientists. But in general, there may be... I just like to think that trends may reflect through the funhouse mirror anxieties in our culture. I feel like there were one or two other trends I wanted to mention, but I'm not thinking about them right now. So, if you guys notice any trends, that would be interesting to hear from you, or just other thoughts about underlying things that affect kinds of fiction that we see. Yeah, so talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.